conscious of the environment around them, and as it relates to economics, and as it relates to religion, and then politics, and all of those other things that go along with it.
Just want to inject a little bit for our viewers who may not know Brother Luqman. He was also a very famous music producer here, and he was able to travel around this country and maybe visit and see a lot of the Afro-American communities in America. So I just want to get...
Well, I did travel extensively after being in the music industry, and I think that even makes me a little more sensitive to many of the things that was going on in the city, in the country, and in the world, as a matter of fact, as it relates to people, because most of my songs and the things that I was writing about, you know, you write about people and you write for people, so I was very sensitive to human affairs. And after seeing the African American community all over this country in such a devastating condition, that you try to find answers to that and find out, well, why?
Well, Brother Luqman, just for historical perspective, can you just give us a feel of what it was like to be an African American in the times you're speaking of?
Well, to me, in that time during the 60s, you know, I only can speak for myself, but basically my whole focus was music. And that's what my desire was, is to be a musician and a producer and a composer. But in doing so, as I said a moment ago, that during that time you had all types of movements going. You had the Martin Luther King, you had Malcolm X, you had Elijah Muhammad. I mean, it was a revolution. There was a time in this country where African American people were not only fighting for their civil rights, but also it was a time when the government of America was being challenged by the African American community. There was tremendous economic moves made in this country. And so as a young man during that time, and after getting out of high school, and much of the historical aspects, you have to really look at the historical aspects of African American people, is that through the education system, they don't teach you much about the African experience here in America. And so when you get out of school, I learned more out of school about African American life than I did in school. Basically, school was void of any historical aspects of African American life. And so the question you asked, what was it like? It was like a light bulb almost going off in my head to find out that these conditions still existed in America, and that there were people in this country, men, women, organizations that have been fighting and organizing to try and level the playing field for African American people as it relates to politics, education, and also a different version, a different story about religion. And I had access to those things, and so it was a very gratifying time for myself to be able to have access to that information.
Well, Brother Luqman, let me ask you, now as we know it, this was the condition of African Americans at that time. Did that make them more predisposed to listen to the message of Islam?
Well, I think that the message of Islam had always been in this country. I mean, there were Moorish Americans, there were people of Arab descent, you know, people from all over, but no one really concentrated on the African American community to bring the message of Islam to African Americans. You know, so that's why I mentioned the Nation of Islam was a vehicle that came to the need of African American community. Do for self. And that whole philosophy of doing for self was basically a nationalistic kind of concept because of the condition that African American people were in that.